It's so nice to see your garden. And I thought, when I saw the weather forecast, I thought, oh my God. But actually, all your stunning perennials look magnificent in the rain. And it's very autumnal, isn't it?
A lot I do actually. If they flop over, I will cut them back because they just fall over each other. And this year, everything's been so much taller because we had such a wet spring and a long wet spring.
Yeah.
So it has been manicured a bit, not much, but a bit.
But people, whenever you go around anyone's garden, they always say, oh, you should have been here earlier or last year. But I do think it looks tremendous. And perennials, hello, someone's come to join us. Perennials are obviously been massively in vogue in the last 15 years, haven't they? They seem to be increasing in popularity. Why is it, do you think, that they have sort of overtaken shrubs? And when I first started, it was shrubs, wasn't it?
I think that the shrubs are very much the landscaping of things, and also in the 1960s and 1970s they were very popular with gardens because they were easy to maintain. People didn't have gardeners anymore after the war, etc. But the perennials really took hold in this country due to Blooms of Bressingham in the 1970s, and they started introducing plants that were already perhaps other plants that were in Europe, but the Europeans really then started establishing a style of gardening which not necessarily, and this is in the 1990s, that not necessarily suits small gardens, but it popularised the perennials. So Pete Aldolf is very famous for his fabulous landscapes, was really centrefold to that. And I think since then it's increased the number of varieties of introduced and bred.
Yeah, I remember sort of in the mid-70s in Holland, they were doing big parks with very big, expansive
very
areas,
much
weren't they?
landscaping.
And in Japan, you know, anywhere where there's like a sort of a more continental climate, and it all went down below and covered with snow in the winter, and then it all came into life in the spring and summer. But so you had this house, you bought it from your father, and it's this beautiful oak, green oak house which he built, or your mother built, and then you've terraced it. You put in the garden, so you inherited pretty much a blank canvas.
Well, this was the garden, so what's behind you was the garden, but it was just, geraniums and weeds and clover, and buttercup. So we then had to evolve and go down, but also because I needed somewhere to put the plants I want to photograph and describe and learn about.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, this is more of a catalogue of perennials really, and how to grow them, what grows best, what they look like, if they're worthy, garden worthy. And new plants, I get new ones all the time. I go to a garden centre and think, oh, I haven't got that, I'll try that one.
Yeah.
So I do that all the time.
Yeah. So you trained in art. So like your mother Pat, the sculptress, she went to Wolverhampton Art College, you went to Bristol, and then your daughter Ellie's gone to art college too. So you did that, and I remember then when you worked for your dad, David Austin, with the rose business for about 12 years, was it?
About 15, yes.
12, 15 years. Yeah. And so you went from the art to plants, and then you started up your herbaceous, and you've been growing herbaceous now for 40 odd years?
Yes, I have. My art has been included really in how to describe a plant. So the photography, initially drawing and so on, but the photography is very important to me. Taking photographs has replaced watercolour.
Well, I remember your early catalogues though, and they were beautiful line drawings in pen and ink, and they were stunning. But now I use your online website a lot because it is beautifully illustrated. You give the nuts and bolts about each plant, what is good. And so with something like Persicaria, there are hundreds of different Persicarias, but you seem to select the very best.
Yes, and I've grown an awful lot of them.
And you've selected,
yes.
So you've made it easier for us.
Yes, that's the idea.
Yeah,
yes.
and I find that really helpful.
I do get a bit stuck when it comes to like geraniums. I love hardy geraniums. So it's not necessarily in vogue with the mass planting schemes, but for a smaller garden, no garden can be without a geranium, as far as I'm concerned, because you could have a 4-foot geranium, geranium silostome, ground cover. There's something for everyone, and they've got lovely foliage as well. So geraniums are something where it's very difficult to limit because there's so much to choose from.
But I think they maxed out in popularity, didn't they? Because they're easy, because they flower for a long time. You don't have to divide them.
Yeah.
You can cut the dead flowers off you like to make the leaves look a bit fresher, but they are the easiest plant, and they give and give.
Absolutely.
And I think when any plant is too popular, I see the cat is just attacking the camera bad there. Sorry, darling. Yes.
Come on, Evie.
So when any plant is very popular, because it's very easy to grow, we become slightly
complacent about them.
Yes,
it's very
exactly.
true. Yeah. Absolutely, it is true. I mean, one of the delight of moving to this garden was I was able to grow a vast range of epimediums, barrenwort, and they'll grow in shady areas. Some grow in very dry areas, Epimedium sulphureum does, and they're evergreen, some don't. But I've been able to experiment with this new garden on things that some don't grow very well at all, some romp away. So again, that gives me something a bit more unusual to actually really...
Yeah, but I always associate you a lot with the peonies and with the irises, because at Chelsea you've exhibited over many years, you've done some wonderful stands. But your main seller, your best sellers would be?
Anemones, Japanese anemones are very popular, hardy geraniums, depends on the season. The things with the irises and peonies and exhibiting them was really because they're actually, it's the only show you can show these plants at. And
because of the time of year.
Because of the time of year. So so that is the benefit. That's why we got known for them. Although we do have national collections, which is fantastic, and they do grow well in the field. But really, it's the delight of perennials is the vast range. Shape, colour, size. You put them in any location. They're not fussy. They die down in the winter, okay, but you get the beautiful, the whole evolving plant throughout the year. And then you get something a bit more unusual, a Galenia trifoliata. I don't know if you know that plant, but you get the brown, the bronze autumn foliage. So it's the autumn foliage as well. And things like crocosmia have lovely seed heads, which you can cut and put in a vase. So there's a really...
and crocosmia, you see, you are very wet over here, and we are much dry over there, but crocosmia will do equally well with me as it will with you. So it's a really good plant like that, isn't it? And I was interested when you said, you know, and you read these books, they say you should divide herbaceous perennials every so and so year. Otherwise, you get this sort of clump that grows to the edge, and you get the dead middles. And if you don't divide that, you get that. But you said you don't do any of that here. These have been in for 12 years. You've not divided them. You've let them do their own thing, and they look magnificent.
If they do get a bit overbearing, I take bits off the side.
Yeah.
So that almost invigorates it again. But I do reduce them. But the thing is, we don't have much time and energy these days, do we, really? I mean, bearing in mind, busy people. And the thing about perennials in the old style, the old rules of any of these perennials, like the rule about peonies, you can't plant, divide a peony, which is rubbish, it was because you had gardeners, you could do it. So a lot of these rules came through and were propagated in a different way, whereas really now a lot of plants are much smaller, for smaller gardens, put in garden centres, so they look great in the garden centre.
Yes.
They look in a pot, they don't fall over, they grow good looking pot. So it's if a plant doesn't grow for me, it doesn't grow.
And so here, you plant your plants, and you'll plant a perennial, something like 8 per square metre. Would it be for something
at least
8 per square metre? Yeah. And that would be the same whether it was a persicaria or a
no,
geranium?
if it's a big one, if it's a big plant like a persicaria, I mean, some of them really, if you put 2 in, it's going to be vigorous. In this soil.
In this soil, yeah.
So one would be fine per square metre. But you might put other things in, and perhaps as they grow, move them out. But it is quite... It depends on your size of garden. If you've got a large garden, then absolutely fantastic, put a little bit closer and so on. But if you've got a smallish garden or a medium-sized garden, you may not want it overrun with a big plant. So it really is trying to choose it.
Yeah, and I always remember those experiments I did at Bath University years ago with Peter Fode, and he said the only disadvantage of putting them in too tightly was A, the cost, and B, in droughts, some did much better under stress than others. So if you had a clump of 8 of the same plant, 1 or 2 would be the super sizes, and the others would be dwarfed.
Yes.
So you get more even growth if they're a bit more apart. So and then once you've planted them with these perennial borders, they must have looked pretty good the first year.
They looked actually very good, I think, properly up to about 2 years ago, although when we had the garden open, people said, I think it looks even better than when you wrote the perennial book. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, the perennial book is now a few years old. So, but it evolves. The thing about garden, it never stands still. It evolves. It's an organic thing, and it does its own thing, and plants settle and others die.
So when these start to look miserable and die really bad later on, you'll just come out with a strimmer? Or how will you do it?
Well, it depends. If my husband's feeling energetic, he'll come out with a strimmer. And in spring, before things start to grow, then we'll cut the tops off. Or I will just gradually go around as certain plants don't look so great. But for me, it's also giving something for the wildlife.
Yeah.
So something like the persicaria, plant like the persicaria just collapses. But if you start moving the old foliage before new begins to grow, you will find there's ladybirds, there's all sorts of other insects. So I think it's really important to allow that wildlife to stay where it is over winter.
So with mine, I tend to, if they look really tatty, I'll just remove them as they look tatty.
Yes.
And then I mulch, but you don't mulch.
I don't have to.
No, I've got such thin light tool. I just bang on the mulch every autumn and winter. So you find you've got some nice new introductions.
Yeah.
And tell me about this alchemilla that you found.
This is one of the benefits of doing my own weeding. I look after my whole garden. Is that I can leave seedlings and see things that I don't want.
So no one else comes into your borders.
Nobody else comes in my borders. They cut the lawn or edges or whatever, but nobody else comes in the borders. So this was just a seedling. It just cropped up, and I thought that was rather interesting. It's probably about 8 years ago.
Alchemilla mollis.
Yes, Alchemilla mollis. So, and it's consistent. I mean, obviously the striatum is sort of varied, but it never goes back to green.
Even when it seeds?
And I've never actually found it seeded yet.
Right.
So
so it's all divisions.
It's all divisions, and we've been dividing it up over the last 3 years. I mean, I started selling it about 2 years ago, and it's been excellent. It's an excellent plant. Not too big. It's quite small because of the disease in it. But it works really well.
And what are you calling it?
We call it Cream Dream.
Oh, Cream Dream. That's a good one.
Daughter's name, not mine.
Right. And the other one, you mentioned you've got a nice persicaria.
The persicaria, which is over there.
Yeah.
The red persicaria. So we called it David, not after my father. It's after David Howard, who's a wonderful wholesale grower.
Yes.
And he came some years ago, and I showed it to him. He said, that's the best one I've seen for a long time. So,
really?
Yeah, so that's why I thought, well, yes.
And you think that's a cross between Inverleaf and
a
Fat
shorter
Domino?
one, and Fat
Inverleaf is a very short one with me, and it doesn't like the dry weather. No. Fat Domino are much taller, pinky dark, pinky reddy colour. Yeah. So that's lovely, isn't it? I have to say, it's a very tight clump, isn't it?
It is, and it's those are only planted actually this year, but I've got one by the greenhouse, and those have been there for 5 years.
Really?
Yes, so that's the sort of average size.
And what are you going to call that?
That's the same thing. That's the same plant, but it's 5 years old.
But what are you calling it?
David.
Oh, that is David. Sorry, I'm being thick. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
No, that's lovely. I must make a note of David. So just to quickly canter through your spaces then, so you've got your main borders here with the terraces going down to the beautiful rolling Welsh hills, aren't they? Absolutely phenomenal. And then you've got more beds over here where you're obviously growing on stock.
Yes.
And then you've got your nursery elsewhere where you've got fields of things to grow.
This border here actually has tree peonies in. I have something like 25 different tree peonies.
Wow.
And we're going to try and propagate them on, but it's quite difficult. I need someone who knows about grafting. So
you can divide them, can't you? You can lift them and divide them when they're big, can't you?
No, they're really, really different. We managed to kill one nearly by moving it from this wild patch here down there. The tree peonies and then intersectional peonies. Then our plants and my iris seedlings are over there.
Right, and then you've got your main nursery areas, and it is all mail order.
Yes, it is. Apart from 2 days a year we open, which next year I think, depending on dividing this border and planting it, will probably be July.
Oh, lovely. And then you've got your little veg garden
My veg borders, which are actually full of spent peat-free compost.
Right.
And honestly, they are so amazing. They've grown so big.
It's the wet, isn't it?
Yes.
And I love seeing the sheep
Yes.
on the hill. And we saw that before, but now the mist has come in.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I think it's wonderful. Thank you very much for showing us around. I'm sorry we didn't bring sunshine.
No, well,
we couldn't manage
we
that.
have had sunshine. We missed it.
Oh, I'm sorry we were late, but thank you very much. And I love this.
Thank you.